We are now live. While we wait for followers, I will tell you that we have some really excited things in the works for you guys. We were going to wait until we got, here we go, Beny, until we had 2,000 followers and share it with you guys this week, so get excited. Beny, I accepted your request to be on, so, here he goes. Okay, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good. I was just stalling to get a few followers on, so.
That's fine. Stall away.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
So, I guess we'll just start because people will show up when they show up and watch it afterwards if they want to catch up. So, that's just how we do it. So, are you, you can hear me? Because I can hear you.
I can hear you perfectly, yeah.
That's like a first timer that it's actually connecting, so.
Nice.
Okay, so if you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and kind of what your connection is to our topic for today, pornography.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. So, my name is Beny Schonfeld. I am a father of two. I have a full-time job. I am pretty much a regular guy. And what connects me to the topic is just deep personal experience. I struggled with pornography addiction for many, many years. About 25 years in active addiction from the time I was 11 until I was 35 and I arrived at recovery. I can share with you a little bit of that journey if you think it'll help add context. My journey with pornography addiction got started when I was 11 years old and I was exposed to pornography at that age. I hadn't entered puberty or developed in any way. I was really, really young and hadn't had any sexual experiences or even discovered my own body or masturbation at that point. So looking back, it's quite interesting that my first sexual experience was pornography. Needless to say, the experience was traumatic. I did not know what I was getting into. It was shocking, but it was titillating and exciting at the same time. It was secret, which added to the excitement in a way. I was being naughty. I was being a bad boy. And I remember really clearly just feeling a shock through the system that stayed with me. When I hear people tell their stories about trying heroin for the first time or trying cocaine for the first time or finding their first drink, this is what it felt like. It was just a powerful, powerful feeling that overcame my whole body, and I was hooked. Many years went by, though, before I really had access to pornography. I was a young kid. I was living in a small Jewish community in Venezuela. This was 1989, before the internet, right? So pornography was not readily available to me as a young kid, aside from that first experience that I had, which was at a friend's house. And so a few years went by before I really was able to get access to pornography. But in the meantime, my life started becoming really difficult. My parents' marriage started to disintegrate. They were getting a divorce when I was around 12. And I didn't connect the dots until much later when I started working on recovery. But I realize now that I was a young boy with very few healthy coping tools to deal with what was going on in my life. And so right around that time when my parents were getting divorced is when I discovered masturbation. And it came, once again, like getting your first drink. You know, it was something that immediately became compulsive for me. It was something that I did nightly to soothe myself and go to sleep. I didn't know it then, but I was numbing and anesthetizing myself through whatever was going on in my life. Insecurities, fears, my home situation, which was, other than divorce, and it was a good divorce. It was I had a great childhood, right? But anyways, later on, I get to 15 years old, and my first sexual experience happens to be very traumatic as well. So it was essentially, I was set up with a prostitute at 15 years old, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do. It wasn't somewhere I wanted to be. It was not what I wanted to experience for my first sexual encounter. It was something that I tried to avoid for many years, but didn't feel like I had a voice to just say no. I felt like I had to go along with it. And I found myself in that situation, and by that time, the encounter was very, very foreign and uncomfortable and unnatural to me. So I panicked. I was extremely scared. Again, I didn't want to be there. And the difference between experiencing it in real life and what I had been seeing, let's say in my head, fantasizing about the porn that I had watched all those years ago, was a completely different reality. So I couldn't reconcile the two. And I remember kind of being detached from myself through the experience. But the experience got worse, and my body couldn't respond. And eventually what ended up happening was that, the prostitute essentially penetrated me. And my body responded, and so I struggled after that for many, many years, because I couldn't understand how, if I wasn't enjoying something, why would my body respond to it? If I was forced to be doing something, why is it that I responded? A lot of insecurity. And of course, I dove more and more into porn at that point. So by the time, let's say we fast forward from my teens all the way through adulthood, I grew up, I got married. Throughout my marriage, pornography was a really big problem. My sexual experiences with my ex-wife, my wife at the time, were always very, very difficult. So pornography did not help us in that regard. It made things worse.
Sorry,
hurt her. Yeah.
Would you be open to questions as you go along?
Absolutely, yeah.
To the end. Okay, so I'm just going to interrupt you because there were two questions that you could choose to answer or not
Sure,
to.
of course.
How are you forced to be with her was one of the questions. And then what do you mean by body responding? So
Gotcha.
It's a little bit behind, but.
Gotcha. So it wasn't uncommon. In fact, it was I'll answer both. So it wasn't uncommon. It was actually very widespread that boys of my age at the time, 13, 14, 15, we would be set up with a prostitute at around that age. It was kind of a rite of passage.
Like where you were from, where you lived?
Where I was from. It's a very, Latin society, so machismo gets mixed into it. It makes things very confusing for a boy growing up. And so it was part of it was just what had to be done when you were that age. And if you didn't, I would have risked being called all sorts of names and bullied and so forth. So on the one hand, there was the peer pressure, and on the other hand, there was the desire to kind of fit in with the social structures of my time, which kind of dictated that this is something I had to do. So that's question number one. It was something that just was kind of the rule for boys my age at the time. And as far as my body responding, so very, very straightforward. So as I was scared and confused and in panic, I could not maintain an erection, right? And so when all of a sudden this woman penetrates me, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what she's doing, but all of a sudden my body responds and I get an erection, and I eventually achieve orgasm, which is something, of course, more than an hour or so had passed in the process. I was desperate to leave. So I just kind of let things happen because I didn't feel like I could say no. So it's a very kind of confusing and deeply traumatic experience for a boy, as it would be for a girl as well. And anyone who goes through sexual abuse or rape might be able to relate, or will be able to relate to being in a situation where one doesn't want to be there, experiencing things that one doesn't want to experience. And what makes it even more confusing is that physiologically our bodies may respond to it, even though we're hating every minute of it. And so the guilt and the shame and the confusion that goes along with that experience, you know, X many years after that experience, if one doesn't work on it, if one doesn't deal with it, it can be devastating. Mm-hmm.
And then before you continue, there were just a couple other questions.
Sure.
Where did you grow up, which you kind of mentioned. And then the other question was, you were forced to do that even going to a Jewish school. So maybe, I know you said you were from a small Jewish community, so I don't know if that was an assumption or.
Yeah, I did go to a Jewish school. Yeah, I did. And it wasn't an Orthodox school. It was, you know, they would call it, I guess, conservative. Yeah, it was part of the society in Venezuela that we lived in, whether you were a Jew or not. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to continue, I think I left off when I was married. Pornography did not help my relationship in any way. It only made things more difficult as I started consuming more and more pornography because, you know, the high of the past was no longer enough. Mm-hmm. So I needed more, and I needed more extreme versions of pornography over time. So different stuff that I hadn't seen before in order to be able to get stimulated, right? As I started progressing through those stages, of course, I started to withdraw, and I started to isolate, and I started to keep secrets, and I started to lead a double life, in essence, where I was doing these things without my wife at the time being aware of it. And without me being aware of the damage I was causing myself or my relationship. At that point in my life, it was literally the one thing that kept me going. It was my medicine to everything. If I was anxious, I would medicate using that substance. If I was angry, I would medicate using that substance. If I was fearful, resentful, nervous about work, you know, you name it, whatever the discomfort was, that was my go-to medicine. So in that regard, it's a very straightforward substance like any other. You know, it just wasn't a bottle, or it wasn't heroin, or it wasn't whatever. It was pornography. But anyways, that progressed. And by the time I was 35 and I reached my bottom, I was acting out with pornography anywhere from 3 to 6 times a day. So it had completely overtaken my life. I was completely disconnected from myself, from other people. I was keeping this, shameful secret that I didn't know how to talk about, right? I didn't know who to share it with. I didn't feel I could share it with anybody. I thought I was either going to die with this secret or I was going to stop. And no matter how hard I tried to stop over the years, I kept getting worse and worse and worse. So the day comes when, February 20th, 2013, and I had been in therapy for years. I had been keeping this a secret from my therapist. I mean, it's true insanity what I was capable to do when I was in denial about my own condition and when I was minimizing my behavior. Because all along the way, of course, we have all these justifications and rationalizations, right? This is what men do. It's totally normal because we hear about others doing it as well, so we think it's normal. Mix in the little machismo that I got from the society I grew in, and it's even more of a manly thing to do.
Which, by the way, you got a comment related to your culture, so I'll just read it now. Many of our clients from South America speak of this, even within the Orthodox community. Thank you for sharing your story. And then again, especially at the age of 12 to 14, when neurochemicals are naturally balancing out, it's a natural progression. Thank you for sharing. So important for all of us to learn about. Yeah. Okay.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining. So, when I reach my bottom, my life is in shambles. I don't know what to do, but I know that if I don't seek help, I'm about to cross a line that I don't want to cross. So my acting out behavior within sexual addiction had been limited and restricted to pornography for all of these years, partly because of my sexual abuse early on. I just didn't feel the confidence to seek women, right? I took shelter in pornography. It was a safe place for me. But I knew that if I didn't get help, I was going to cross that line, and I didn't want to. And when I saw myself reaching that point, I said, okay, I definitely have a problem because I haven't been able to stop. I don't know how to stop. And, you know, I need to do something about it. So that's when I opened up to my therapist at the time. And he said, yeah, Beny, you're definitely a porn addict, and go to your meetings. Go to your meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, keep coming to therapy. And that's how things started to change for me around 6 years ago. And of course, you know, now forward 6 years, here I am trying to contribute, do my best to contribute to a conversation about this topic, because all of the crazy thoughts that kept me away from recovery for so many years, I know those crazy thoughts are in a lot of people's minds right now. I know a lot of men and a lot of women are struggling with pornography addiction. I know a lot of men and a lot of women who are struggling because their partners are struggling with a pornography addiction. And the saddest of the realities is that for our children, you know, where I ended up in terms of pornography is where they're getting started. So remember, I started with, you know, 1989, before the internet. High-speed internet changed the game, right? So now it's available 24/7, any category from A to Z that you can imagine, and those that you can't imagine, right, are there a couple of clicks away. Things that past generations perhaps had to, you know, get lost in some underworld for 50, 60 years in order to encounter those kinds of sexual scenarios in real life. These things are available 3 clicks away on many websites without any kind of age control or gating. And the reality is that a lot of our kids are getting exposed to it very, very young. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here to help myself on some level, because sharing my experience helps me. I'm here trying to raise the bottom for those who are struggling with it, so that things don't get so bad before they take action. And I'm here to provide some hope for the partners, spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends of people who are struggling with the addiction, because there's also hope for them. And really the ultimate goal is to collectively leave a different legacy to our children. We got here to this place slowly and over time. You know, what we're going through today is linked to many big moments decades ago. And now it's time to kind of take responsibility for what we've done as the collective and say, hey, we have to look at this. We have to talk about this, because we have to get right with it, with ourselves, in our relationship with pornography, whether we're struggling with it or not, right? We have to examine this topic so that we can hopefully give our kids a chance.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for being here. We have a few really good questions. So we could just walk through those. That would be great.
Amazing. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So did you speak to anyone about this while you were going through this, before your therapist, friends, family? I was also wondering that, maybe if your wife knew.
No one. Zero. Zero, zero, zero. So it was something I kept secret. And yeah, it was just something I kept secret. My wife at the time knew that I watched pornography, but she didn't know the extent of it. Okay? She didn't know that I was acting out when I was supposed to be working. She didn't know that I was acting out when I said I was in the bathroom, right? Until, of course, I discovered that I had a problem, and at which point I started disclosing, and I started, you know, confronting the problem together with her, with our therapist, on my own, with our therapist, going to my meetings, etc. So, yeah, I hadn't told anybody. I was going to die with that secret, especially when I saw, you know, the way, let's say, the big noisemakers what would happen in the media, for example, when Tiger Woods was found out as a sex addict, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those things were really, really scary to me because I could hear my friends making fun of the guy. I couldn't understand the guy and what he was doing. But at the same time, and I couldn't justify his behavior either. But at the same time, I felt conflicted. Like, there's something in what he's doing that I kind of connect with. And, that kept me from asking for help. Because if I ever shared what's going on with me, this is how I would get treated, right? I would be shunned. I would be left alone. Everyone would leave me. No one would love me.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's a good point, sir. Well, you said that you waited until, it was very clear that it was a problem. I was actually thinking maybe people would want to hear what some signs are that people can realize that it is a problem to try to get help before that stage, before they're kind of feeling like,
Right. There's a lot. This question is a great one. It's one that people have been asking a lot, and so I love to hear it because there's a lot of ways to look at it. But I really, try to look at a couple of things. So one, if you're doing it, if you're consuming, if someone is, if you're consuming pornography, the first question I would ask you is, are you keeping it a secret? Or are you open about it with your significant other? Right? If you're alone, is it still a secret? Is it something that causes you shame? Is it something that, while might be exciting in the moment and titillating in the moment, after it's done, you feel kind of icky about it? So these are things that I would encourage people to start paying attention to, right? But of course, when one is in that moment, the capacity for denial and justification is just mind-boggling. Like, we'll find a way to justify it to ourselves. And so the simplest way to know if you have a problem, I think, is just try to stop, right? If you're watching porn, on the one hand, if you're watching porn every day, once a day, that's a sign. Like, why would anyone need to watch porn once a day, right? Without judgment, without criticism, without self-loathing or self-judgment, right? Without attaching morality to it, simply in terms of assessing whether I need help. Why do I need to watch this every day? And on the other hand, what would happen? Let's run an experiment. What would happen if I try to stop, right? And so I would set a goal of a week. Let me try to stop. Let me stop for a week and see how it goes. See how you feel without it, because withdrawal is a real thing. See what, how your mood improves or doesn't improve. See how your inner dialogue changes with or without it, because all of these things are affected. See how your sense of shame or self-esteem improves or not when you stop consuming it. And of course, if you do watch it again, pay attention to how you feel and what you're thinking in that moment, and seek help. Seek help. And help is a very practical thing. It's actually quite simple to get better if one can get over the insanity that keeps us away.
Someone actually asked a question right on that topic. Yeah. What do you feel really helped you stop? And can you pinpoint a certain thing that helped with it, like that helped you in the 12-step program?
So what helps me stop, or what helped me stop? The number one thing was finding a local 12-step recovery meeting that I could go to. It's crucial. It's crucial. It was something I really, really feared. Going there for the first time was something I really, really feared. In my mind, struggling with sex addiction made me some sort of pervert or monster. That's how much shame I felt. That's what I equated pornography addiction with. And so what I expected to see on the other side of the door at the 12-step recovery meeting was a bunch of perverts and sex offenders. And I was completely wrong. Well, I was on the other side, or who were on the other side of the door, where just men and women just like me, of every religion, of every walk of life, who had struggled with the same problem and were at some point in their recovery. Some of them had gotten a lot better and some had not. But it was the first safe place where I could share about it and know with absolute certainty that I would not get judged, I would not get criticized. In fact, what I was getting in return was unconditional love for the first time. And so that was very helpful. You know, if one is consumed by shame for 35 years of my life, experiencing that acceptance that comes with hearing my story from another person's lips is life-changing. So that would be the most helpful thing that helped me at the beginning. And what was the second part of the question?
It was, can you pinpoint a certain thing that helped you in the 12-step program?
Yeah, connection. Connection. The connection that comes with, once again, fellows who've traveled the road that I've traveled, right? The sense of connection to a higher power once I started working my program. Obviously the sense of connection within myself that also is developed with the program. It's all about connection. Like, you know, I think you shared the quote from Johann Hari about the opposite of addiction is not recovery or sobriety, it's connection. It's really, really true. It's all about connection. And that is perhaps the biggest cost of the addiction, is a severe disconnection from everything and everyone that leaves one isolated and completely insane. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, another question, different topic. How old were you when you were sexually abused? You mentioned that. And then was it before or after you first saw pornography? I might have missed the beginning, but... Right.
So the first time I watched pornography, I was 11. So my sexual abuse came afterwards when I was 15. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Straightforward. And then... Oh, okay. This is a great question that we can delve into a little bit. What is your advice on how to make sure our children don't get into porn? I love that question.
Yeah, I love that question too. I think this question has a layer that needs to be addressed, which is the expectation, right? I thought that it was okay for me to expect or think or believe that my kids would go through puberty and their teenage years without being exposed to pornography. I think a more realistic expectation is accepting to a certain degree that it's far more likely that they will be exposed. And so how do I prepare myself as a parent to make sure that if that happens, my kid has already been educated about what they're seeing, that they have some preparation of what they're seeing and what it could do in the long run, but also the environment at home, the trust and the safety and the vulnerability, especially in the relationship between the kid and the parent, for them to come back and share and say, hey, this happened to me today and I want to talk about it. So we can help process it with them. And so once again, that ties back into examining our own relationship with pornography so we can be there for our kids, because we can't help them if we don't educate ourselves about it. We can't create an environment where they'll feel safe to seek our help if they're going to feel judged and criticized and ashamed or shamed for having experienced that, right? So back to the question, I think what I try to do is keep my expectation in check. And so far, my kids have not been exposed to it. I have a 13-year-old. Yeah. Well, I have to trust in what they're telling me, right? So my 13-year-old and my 11-year-old, they tell me they have not been exposed to it, but they've been prepared. They know what it is, and they know that if they are exposed because a friend shows it to them, or they click on the wrong thing online, or they deliberately look for it online, that they can come and talk to me. Because I think looking back at my own experience, what was so damaging about my sexual abuse, for example, or my first experience with porn, wasn't necessarily that I went through it. What was most damaging were the years afterwards that I was stuck with a story in my head that was self-defeating and self-destructive, instead of having opened up and seek and sought help, right? So what hurt me the most was not being able to talk about it. It was the shame attached to the secret, right? So in terms of our kids, I think the most important thing is we start with ourselves. Am I smoking dope and telling my kid not to smoke it, right? Am I leading by example? If I want my kids to stay away from it, am I staying away from it? At any level of the spectrum, you don't have to be struggling with addiction in order to be consistent with that, right? And next, educating myself on how to communicate about the topic without attaching morality or attaching right or wrong or attaching shame and guilt, because those are the things that keep our children away from opening up. And keeping the expectation in check. I'm not sure it's a matter of them never being exposed. I think we have to prepare ourselves for how to help them when they do. Mm-hmm. The stats are not very favorable of a zero exposure. But we can slowly change that, hopefully.
For such high stats of likelihood of exposure, like what percentage of people actually do make that a conversation in their house if it's inevitable? I don't know. I want, like, for people who are watching, is that something that you guys talk about with kids?
Very few, even people in recovery. So I'll give you examples. There's 12-step recoveries for just about everything. And AA has been around forever. And Ellie Nash, whom he gives an example of, someone you might invite to your Shabbat table, and they might share, I'm celebrating 15 years of sobriety from alcohol today, right? And people would congratulate them and be happy for them and celebrate with them, right? But what would happen if someone came to your Shabbat table and said, today I'm celebrating 15 years sobriety from pornography, right? So even within recovery, it's a very stigmatized topic. So even people who are in AA or in NA or any other 12-step program, they might be struggling with this particular substance as well, and still feel the shame of not, feeling like they can't share it with anybody within people that are in recovery. So then you take that into the family unit, right? Where if we go with the stats, a lot of couples are struggling with this in one way or another. Either one or both people are struggling with pornography consumption at one level of the spectrum, because it really comes, it's not one size fits all. Mm-hmm. But even between the coupleship, it's a hard conversation to have, and very few couples have it. Mm-hmm. Very few couples confront their spouse and say, hey, I love you, but I'm concerned because I think you may be watching a lot of pornography, and it hurts me because I feel betrayed. I feel cheated on. I feel unsafe when having sex with you. I feel all of these things. So the ability to have the conversation in a loving, constructive way within the coupleship is severely compromised. Most people can't have the conversation that way, so they avoid it at all costs. They just deny it and avoid it, right? And so it becomes a game of hide and seek. The addict hides it by any means necessary, and the spouse or partner of the addict is constantly obsessed with what the other is doing or not doing. And eventually they might discover or not discover. So not a lot of people are having the conversation. And so if you can't have it between the couple, so imagine how many people are actually having it with their kids. It's a catch-22.
Right.
And which is, back again, we have to start by looking at ourselves in the mirror now, quickly, because otherwise every conversation we're not having with our kids is literally a conversation that the pornographers are going to have with our kids. Because instead of asking us about sexuality and what I should look for in a boyfriend or girlfriend, and what is healthy sexuality, and within the religious framework, how does sin and God come into all of this, right? If we don't start reframing all of these things that we've never been really good at in the past, at talking about sexuality with our kids, now more than ever, we need to look at this and we need to learn how to do it, because otherwise our kids just are at great risk.
Yeah. Yeah, we had some questions on that topic exactly, but I'm a little behind now.
Yeah.
Let's
check the comments, see what we can answer.
Here's one that was like very specific to what you just said. From a religious lens, how would you suggest we destigmatize the topic of sex and sexuality within our communities and when speaking to our kids?
Well, there's a couple of ways that it can be done. So within our religious communities, none of us exist alone. There's great camaraderie and there's great bonds between families and friends, right? And so the first step might be, or could be, getting together with trusted friends and having a conversation about it. If you might be able to get, for example, half a dozen girlfriends to your house and, have a conversation about it. You might even include the Rebbitzin in the conversation, right? If you're a man and you're concerned about it, maybe start talking to the rabbi about it and saying, hey, this concerns me. I know a lot of people in our community are going through hard times with this. Can we start making this a part of the conversation? Can we find a way to start dealing with this in a positive and constructive way without the shame, without the guilt that makes it so easy for this struggle to persist over time, right? And so it's only going to get better if each of us takes small steps to open up about it, right? Everyone wants to know more about it and no one wants to talk about it, right? So in that way, I pinch myself that somehow I'm able to talk about it publicly, because I thought it was the most shameful secret that I had, and I thought I needed to die with that secret, right? But it's not the case. Now I realize that I'm not alone, like far from it. This is widespread. And so we do have the ability to start having conversations amongst ourselves and to start involving our religious leaders in the conversation, and to start looking at things like, how do we reframe strict religious orthodox concepts and laws and do's and don'ts? How do we reframe all of those in a way that are shame-free, guilt-free, so that our children feel safe in talking about these topics? Not only for us to talk about pornography, but for us to teach them about healthy sexuality within whatever framework we use. So if our framework is Hasidic Judaism, there's got to be a way to reframe certain things so that we can be constructive about it, so that we don't keep repeating the shameful conversations of the past.
Yeah. Wait, sorry. Did you have something else to say on that?
No worries.
Finish?
Yeah. I'm trying to look for the comments as well to see if there's anything else we can answer.
Okay. Here's one. I'm back. I'm caught up to where we left up.
Okay.
Can you please talk more how to create that trust that they would come and tell you about it if they were exposed to it? Back on the kids topic, and at what age do you tell your kids about porn, and what do you tell them?
Awesome questions. So I'll start with the second one first. At what age? The data suggests that as early as age 9,
Whoa.
A lot of kids are getting exposed to pornography. So if we go just by that, it would seem like the age to tackle these conversations is around then, right? Because again, if we're not having the conversation, the pornographers are going to have it first. I started talking to my kids about it at around that age, when my youngest was 8.5 or 9, and my oldest was 10.5, 11. All right. And it didn't happen in a vacuum, though. By that time, I had already provided, with my wife at the time too, some foundation about sexuality and the biology of our bodies, right? So it's not like before talking about sexuality or biology, I started talking about porn. I think the foundation has to be laid, and it has to be laid early. And once again, we really focused on coming at these topics, in a very matter-of-fact, natural, human way, without the shame, without the guilt. Super important. And vulnerability. The other way we build trust. So that was the first question, I think. How do we build the trust so that people, so that our kids open up to us? The little things, right? So we don't build the trust by tackling the big problems. We build trust by showing them that we are trustworthy in the little day-to-day problems that they experience and the little day-to-day experiences that they have, right? The little day-to-day struggles of life. And we do that by providing in all of those areas a non-judgmental, non-critical, loving and accepting environment where we can listen without, we can listen and we can share constructively without damaging, right? And one of the things that has helped me is vulnerability. So sharing my own experience with my kids about what it was like when I was their age, that creates an amazing level of trust, because now my kids see me as human. They understand, they see that I've gone through things just as they are going through things. I think those are the things that have helped me, and I think they would help a lot of people.
Oh, good answer. Someone had a comment. I've been in SAA since 2006 and have not had intentional conversation with my older teen boys. But we are very open about us being safe to talk about topics, so we haven't been brave enough yet.
Yeah. Once again, it's a difficult conversation, even for people who are in recovery. So, yeah. And fear is really at the crux of it. But what I learned through it, if what I think this is Ali Walford who's asking this question or making this comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ali, if you're watching, I'm glad to hear that you're open about, talking about these topics with your kids, and that's important. So what my encouragement would be is to leverage that environment that you've already created and take the plunge and take the risk, because those conversations really never, ever, ever go in the apocalyptic way that we imagine them going. They always go so much better, and they always go exactly as they need to go if one is coming from a place of love, in a place of understanding, in a place of guidance. As we learn in the rooms, speaking from the I statements. This is what I'm concerned with. This is what scares me. As your father or your mother, this is what I would like to be able to provide you, right? So finding ways to communicate constructively like that, practicing what we learn in the rooms with our kids is great. And so my encouragement, Ali, is go for it. There's literally no conversation coming from love that will be damaging to them. In fact, they probably know a lot more than we think they know. Yeah, absolutely.
And another comment, thank you for sharing and for answering so thoughtfully. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And then this one, shout this on the rooftops, exclamation mark.
Absolutely, that's what we're doing. Share the, I don't know, invite your friends, tag your friends to join the live chat.
So I was going to say, so grateful for this live. Wish I could share with everyone I know. So if there's anybody who's watching this now, you can tell your friends that it'll be on for 24 hours. And also, we'll save it on YouTube. So we post that. It's on Project Proactive's bio at the top that you can always find within the week.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I have a question. I don't think we have any other questions outstanding
we're
in the
up.
chat. I have a question that was asked to me via DM earlier today. It's a great question. And I will not say the person's name because I'm not sure if they want to keep their privacy on this. But her question was, how do you protect your children in a situation where the father has a problem with pornography and is unwilling to do anything about it. And so it's a great question. To add a little more context to the situation, this father is no longer in the house. The kids do spend some time with him. So the concerns are, what are my kids exposed to or not exposed to when they spend time with their dad? How do I protect them from being exposed if they haven't already? How do I feel? Those are the concerns, really. And the other challenge is that, once again, it's a very triggering conversation for this woman to have with her, I believe, ex-husband at this point. And so I was chatting with this person, I was thinking about what I would recommend. And it's interesting, the scenario couldn't make it any clearer that the first step really is to stop focusing on what the other person is doing or not doing, because we have no control over it. And this is something that is so common in our spouses or partners, the spouses or partners of people who are the addict, right? Is that there's a lot of focus and fear around the other person's behavior. And what I've seen be helpful to them is to realize and accept that there's little I can do to control someone else's behavior, right? What I can do is examine my relationship to the challenge. So the first step, the first thing that I would recommend is to flip it around and make it about myself and say, well, what is it that I'm fearing here? How is it affecting my sense of safety, my security? Let me own my circumstances, right? Because the guy doesn't live with me anymore. I can't watch him. I don't know what he's doing or not doing. And so then that opens the door to healing my relationship to his or her pornography consumption, right? And then that gives me the tools I need to have a productive, constructive conversation with the other parent without being triggered, where his issues or her issues are theirs and my priorities are my priorities, and I'm clear on what those are. I know what my safety depends on and what it doesn't. And give it your best go at aligning with the other person on what the commitment is in terms of the safety of the kids, right? So that would be my first encouragement, is start looking at my relationship to the situation, at healing what is happening inside of me when I think about my ex-husband or ex-wife or husband or wife acting out, because I can't control them. And then from there, once I have some healing under my belt and the confidence to have a constructive conversation, I can try that. Of course, at the right age, which is hard to tell, depending on the kids, if they're young or not, or how young they are, they might be brought into the conversation where, once again, they can be educated a little bit on what pornography is, and once again encouraged to not be afraid to talk about it if anything happens. Because the reality that some of us might have to accept is that unless we go to court and completely take away custody from the other spouse, they may not be completely safe from exposure, right? So it's kind of a sad reality, of course, in a way. So all the more important for us to really do the work on ourselves so that we can find sanity within ourselves, even through the difficult challenge of having a spouse or an ex-partner or spouse who is struggling with the addiction. I hope that helps.
Yeah,
they watch it later.
Yeah, hopefully they'll watch it after. A question came up that is on back to your topic from before. Maybe we'll reach that. So if I haven't had the conversation yet and my son is already close to 11, do you kind of feel like I already missed the boat? And if not, no. And if not, no. And if not, would the direction of the conversation be any different due to age?
So it's never too late to have the conversation. When it comes to our kids, we never miss the boat. Okay? So I like to tell parents to practice a little self-acceptance and a little self-love with themselves as well, because we might punish ourselves for, I should have had the conversation earlier. Why did I wait so long? Listen, we do what we do, and now we know better, we can do better, right? We did what we did, and now we can do better. So it's never too late to have the conversation. And once again, start by looking at your own relationship with pornography, if there is one. Start by educating yourself on the topic. There are resources out there freely available on the internet on how to have the conversation with our kids. One of them is a website called fightthenewdrug.org.
I'm going to write that down and we'll share that after. What's it called?
Fightthenewdrug.org.
Thenewdrug.org. Okay.
They have a really handy guide on how to talk to our kids. There's another one, and I always forget the name. But they have a book on how to talk to our kids about sexuality and how to talk to our kids about pornography as well. So there are resources out there. Fight the New Drug is an amazing website full of science-based articles on the topic of pornography and how it affects us. Really, really good source of solid information if you want to examine your own relationship with pornography or understand perhaps what your spouse or partner may be going through as well. What else was the question? Oh, is it too late? No. And does it change with age? Yeah. The conversation, of course, will change with age. I've had conversations with my 13-year-old son that I haven't had with my 11-year-old son. It's just how it works. My oldest son, of course, knows more about the topic because of the age that he's at. And then that's also something else that's important to keep in mind. It's not about having the conversation once. It's about loving and consistent and accepting follow-ups after that, right? So it's an open conversation that I'll be having with my kids throughout their journey. I expect I'll be having these conversations with them well into adulthood, even when they're married.
Okay. So, well, someone said, I keep trying and erasing a comment because I have so much to say, and yet nothing I say can accurately depict how unbelievably grateful I am for the conversation.
Free Tobe or Free Toby, TZ.
Free Toby.
Amazing comment. Listen, pick one and ask the question. I love your feedback, but if you do have a question, just pick one and go for it. There's no such thing as a silly or wrong question here, so go for it. And thank you.
And then, what would you say to a 9-year-old? Introduce them to the risk of pornography, or what? So order.
Yeah.
So young, I can't get over that.
I know. But you know something? I encourage you to talk to your friends. When I started opening up about this topic, friends of mine from Venezuela, people that I grew up with around my age, a little older, a little younger, even my same age, some of them started to open up with me again as well. And, I can't tell you how many things I literally thought I was alone in the world. Like no one else had lived through them. No one else had experienced what I experienced. I was convinced that I was the only one. And I really wasn't. Even back then, we were getting exposed to pornography at ages 9, 10, or 11, 12, 13. I'm 42, and any age in between. It's been very common to get exposed early on to pornography. The difference now is that they're not getting exposed to a magazine, right? And there's only maybe half a dozen magazines available in the world, which was the case when I was that age. Now they're getting exposed to hardcore pornography designed to provide the highest levels of chemicals in your head. And of course, it's just so accessible in every shape and form that it's just, it's another game. It's another game because, like I said, this is where my pornography consumption kind of ended, right? At that level, but this is where they're getting started. So what that means is that the progression is so much faster. what took me 25 years of active addiction is happening in 5, 6, 7 years. And so we're getting the kids into the recovery rooms that are 19, 20, 22, and they're completely, pornography has completely kicked their butts and left their relationships in shambles and cost them jobs and their well-being, So in terms of what would I tell a 9-year-old, sex or introducing sex before porn? Yeah, I mean, we got to start by, if you're going to learn the alphabet, you got to start with A. And so I would not recommend talking about pornography if the kid doesn't even know what sex is or how babies are made, right? The basics. And the basics in a loving, productive, constructive way. Not the basics as in, it's a sin, don't do it. The Torah says don't do it, so don't do it. I mean, taking the time to provide a good foundation so that you can build from that and start having conversations about what loving, healthy sexuality looks like and what pornography is and what it does, right? But of course, once again, how do we talk about healthy sexuality when most of us don't know what that is, right? So let's table that, because I think that's the greatest opportunity of the circumstances that we're going through. All right, but I think there was another question, but let's bookmark that one. Turning this into a positive, because that's important that we do that too.
We're gonna be cut off in 3 minutes, but
okay.
There was another question. Hold on.
Another question is the age change with community. No, I know a lot of Orthodox people who have been exposed and are being exposed to pornography at a very, very young age. Being Orthodox does not make you immune in any way. What's up, Benny? What's up, coaching guy? So we're going to be cut off in like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's flip it around. We are scared of this. We are now aware of this. Now let's turn this into an opportunity, because really what lies here at looking at ourselves and looking at how we approach our own sexuality, how we are either consuming or not consuming pornography, the opportunity here is to learn how to love ourselves, how to connect with ourselves and with others, with those close to us, and how to leave a new legacy to our kids around a more healthy sexuality and about self-love and true connection, vulnerable connection to others. That is what this addiction takes away, and I think that's the opportunity for us to find. That is why this addiction is so widespread, because we've never been so easily disconnected and isolated from each other, right? So unable or incapable of loving ourselves as well. And so here we are, and now we get to look at it, and now we get to shine some light on it, and we get to work on it, and we get to learn how to love and how to give and how to connect and how to give our kids something different. So that's what we want to do.
Thank you. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for all
Thanks
your
for having
insights and for sharing your story and for making this an open topic for everyone. We all
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to DM me, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help in any way that I can. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.